Becky Rose Dungeon Girl, and today I'm going to ruin... Hello?
Hello everyone, this is Tim. I'm going to go through and ask you a series of questions.
Okay.
I'm doing these for an RPG research paper.
Well, I'm totally down with science, with the possible exception of the science I used in my game science dice review. There's not much actual science in that.
Number 1. Can you please describe in detail any negative situations that came about in your life because you played RPGs? For example, were you ever bullied, belittled, made fun of, told you were going to hell because you played those games, etc.?
Well, bit deep. No, well, I was bullied, but nothing to do with role-playing. I had negative situations to do with role-playing. I mean, I get teased and stuff at work, and that's all in good humour, and I dish it back, because anyone who knows me knows I'm quite forthright. A classic example, the other day, I'm talking to my boss and I said, when are you going to organise a poker night? He says, well, I'm waiting for somebody else to organise it. It's like, you've got the chips, unless I bring in my fantasy coins. Poker chips! To which my work colleague turns around and says, that's so gangster, you with your fantasy coins and your Sinclair C5.
Number 2. What skills do you think you have personally improved upon by playing role-playing games?
Well, I was a programmer when I was younger. I got on well with computers and terribly with humans. I was bullied so badly that at school even the teachers bullied me. These days, however, I am quite the chatty, sociable person. And that was either down to role-playing or a vast quantity of drugs.
Who introduced you to RPGs?
What was your first experience like playing?
I was introduced to role-playing by an old school friend, who wasn't an old school friend at the time, but we were at school and there were basically two of us that got bullied a lot, and so we hung around together. He invited me along to this club that met in my local town. I went along, I enjoyed it, and within a few years I was running the club.
Number 4. What was your first experience like running a game?
Well, the problem I've got in answering that was I first ran a game when I was like 14 or 15, and in between then and now was my 20s. My 20s involved alcohol and aforementioned drugs. I do not remember my first game that I ran.
Number 5. What was it like designing your own system if you've done so?
Well, yes, I am working on a game. Glad you asked. So my game is called After Forever After, and I hope to release it on Kickstarter next year. It's going to Kickstarter to get the art assets, you see, because I suck at drawing. As I mentioned earlier, when I was younger, I was good with computers. And because I was young, I used to write computer games. So I've actually written dozens upon dozens of games. So gameplay design is something I've got a lot of experience of. And I'm kind of loath to say this, but I did once call up Games Workshop and tell them about some ideas I'd had, some 4 ideas, and were they interested in that I would send them this, my game designs, and I thought, I'll send them my game designs, they'll pay me money, and then I can go work being a game designer. Of course, I never got around to sending them because I wanted to make sure they were perfect before I sent them. So I never finished them. I mentioned the story, however, because all 4 of those things became Games Workshop products. They just designed their own. Did I inspire the idea, or did they have those ideas anyway? I couldn't say, because I didn't work there, because I never submitted my content. So I really enjoy doing the mathematics of it, because programmer, good at maths. And I love creative writing. When I left school, the job I wanted to do was to be a journalist. I did briefly work for a local newspaper. I say briefly, I lasted a week. Since then, I haven't done much in the way of writing that has been published. I entered a writing competition in a Kickstarter a little while ago. I did win it, a fiction contest, 1,000 words. It's not exactly the Pulitzer Prize though, is it? But I enjoy the process of writing. So for me, making my own roleplay system is a really enjoyable experience. Of course, I've chosen to do a fantasy system, so writing the magic system wasn't enjoyable, but I've done a whole other video on that.
Number 6. What was it like making your own setting?
My own world settings, again, it's like writing your own game. I mean, I love creative writing. One of the things that's in my game is quite a lot of little tiny snippets of short stories littered throughout. That's because I enjoy writing, because I hope I'm good at it. So creating my own world setting it's so like writing. You know, when you write a book, you are world building. So doing that as a GM, it's exactly the same process but for a different purpose. And hell, writing a book, it's about, you know, the plots and the characters and so forth. That's exactly the same as role-playing. So yeah, it's a breeze and I enjoy it. I think if anyone out there has written their own game world and enjoyed it, they would probably enjoy writing fiction too.
Number 7. Why do you think tabletop RPGs are not known about by a good many people in the public?
Well, I disagree. Dungeons and Dragons is well known. Everybody knows what Dungeons and Dragons is. But I think awareness of other role-playing games is not so common. That's purely because Dungeons and Dragons dominates the marketplace. But it's as well that we have a Goliath that's big in our community, because that does bring players in. I've had people interested in playing Dungeons and Dragons talk to me and want to play my games. I can't take them all. I mean, I have quite a busy schedule, but I try. And that experience then introduces them to role-playing games, which is the gateway to other games. So Dungeons and Dragons is a good thing, and I think just about everybody has heard of it.
Number 8. What is an RPG, and why are these types of games fun?
It's commonly said that the oldest profession in the world is prostitution, although arguably it's probably killing people. But do you know what the oldest pastime in the world is? It's telling stories. Stories are the very fabric of our entire civilization. It's who we are as a species. Our stories is what makes us. Tabletop role-playing game is telling stories in a collaborative way. The only thing that's amazing is how it took so many tens of thousands of years for us to start rolling silly dice around and doing it in a group fashion.
Number 9. If you're going to teach a new player how to play RPGs, how would you go about doing that? How would you teach someone how to play RPGs for the first time?
Well, that's a really good question. I don't know if I know the answer. At the end of the day, ultimately, their enjoyment of the game will depend on their enthusiasm. And that can be tempered in a new player by their nervousness. If they think that they look like a bit of an idiot playing this game, then odds are they're going to run away from it. And I have seen that. People who felt uncomfortable and just ran for the hills. And so I think the thing to do is really just to accept new players. Just let them know that they're not alone. Talk to them, be social. Do more than just the game with the player.
Number 10. What age group do you think plays these games more so than any other age group?
Well, of course, role-playing boomed in the 70s and through the 80s. And those original players, many of them are still around. So the age group, I think, that plays Dungeons and Dragons has gotten older through the years. But I'm pleased to say that I've seen lots of relatively young people playing the games too. At a convention, it's quite common to see people in their 20s. You don't see many teenagers, but that could in part be down to the fact that teenagers don't often go to many different conventions. It takes lifts from parents and money. I think a lot of tomorrow's D&D players are discovering D&D at university. And of course, when I say D&D, I mean that leads to all role-playing games, but for the vast majority of us, our first role-playing game is D&D, and that will be true going forward, because 5th edition, of course, created such a buzz that there's a whole generation now that's just been introduced to D&D. And the rest of the games industry is going to feed off of that boom.
Number 11. What overall benefits do you think a person that plays RPGs has that perhaps a non-gamer wouldn't have or would have would have less of?
Well, the obvious things is communication and teamwork. Role players learn that you've got to work as a team to solve mighty adventures and big quests. And I think role players generally are good team players. At least they learn those skills. I've heard people say that, all the problem solving and adventures has made me really clever. And then I'm there as a programmer trying not to look down on them because it makes my neck ache. I don't think problem solving is really that prevalent in an RPG when you consider that you meet maybe once a week, and during the course of that week you maybe have one puzzle problem to solve. I think you would gain more problem solving skills doing the crossword in the daily newspaper.
Number 12. Have you ever seen an RPG session break out into any violence? Or have you ever seen, with your own eyes, people becoming more violent as a result of playing RPGs?
I've not seen violence, but I have seen friendships end. There's only so much I can really say on camera though. I still know both parties. But I think it's fair to say that the tension had been there a long time.
Number 13. Do you think RPGs are still seen with the same amount of stigma that they once were? Are they still stigmatized? Was that a word? I'm not sure.
Yes, that's a word. In the English language, you're welcome. It depends which stigma you mean. Do you mean the far-right, nutty woman who couldn't get over her son committing suicide and playing Dungeons and Dragons?
These children not only begin to have violent dreams or violent thoughts or negative, depressing type things, they become very much a part of this character.
There was speculation he was the victim of a campus game called Dungeons and Dragons, but after a month-long nationwide search, he was found unharmed.
No, that's gone. That's completely gone. Nobody believes that nonsense anymore, apart from a few nutcases, and most of them are on medication. Is D&D associated with nerds? Absolutely. But if there's one thing today's society has realised, it's that this world, today's world, is owned and ruled by nerds. Nerds and the seriously fucking rich, of course, are never going to let go from the very top. But just down from the really rich people are the nerds. We're the ones that are making it and breaking it in today's world. We're the ones that are making the technology that will make tomorrow's world. We're the ones that are creating. We're the ones that are inventing. Tomorrow's world is being built by today's D&D players. And I know this because today's world was built by yesterday's D&D players.